So I don't think I'm overstating the facts here when I say this is one of the biggest stories that we have seen in IndyCar racing in a very, very long time. Because for the past year and a half, the sport has been under some of the most immense scrutiny it ever has been from the team owners, the manufacturers, the fans, everybody with eyes locked on Team Penske. The subject of conflict of interest, separating church and state, all of these phrases that you hear about the Penske ownership of IndyCar and the fact that the best team, the most successful team in IndyCar racing history is owned by the organization that runs the sport. And while a blended attenuator, a safety part on the rear of the car, a part modification that might have just been cosmetic, has led to one of the most important pillars of Team Penske, Tim Cindric, to be fired from the organization that he helped rebuild from one of its lowest points in its history. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the implications of all of this because this is widespread. And I guess the question I'm going to try to answer in this video is this enough to appease a paddock that is extremely, extremely upset with all that has happened in recent history regarding the series and Team Penske? By the way, if you haven't already, you should subscribe. I don't want to say it because I almost feel like I'm going to throw away a perfect game here, but we are very, very close to 100,000 subscribers here on the channel. If you want to keep up with all this stuff, this is the place to be. So, what broke this morning is a bombshell of biblical proportions in the world of IndyCar racing, and it is the statement that Team Penske put out today. Team Penske announced today the departures of IndyCar team president Tim Cindric, IndyCar managing director Ron Rosinsky, and IndyCar general manager Kyle Moyer from the organization. Team Penske will have further announcements this week related to personnel and replacements for this weekend's Indianapolis 500. Of course, Rosinsky and Cindric had already been suspended for the controversy involving the blended attenuators, and now they have been let go from the organization, in addition to Kyle Moyer, who runs the 3 car for Scott McLaughlin. There is a further statement from Roger Penske himself. This is the first time he has broken silence on this particular controversy. He needed to. It comes in the form of words written on a screen. Nothing is more important than the integrity of our sport and our race teams. We have had organizational failures during the last 2 years, and we had to make the necessary changes. I apologize to our fans, our partners, and our organizations for letting them down, says Roger Penske. I guess I'll talk about this first, this statement from Roger, because I think about what Doug Bowles said at the press conference 2 days ago when IndyCar, rightfully so, escalated the penalties that were coming down for the number 2 and number 12 car, and rightfully so was as transparent as they could be about those penalties. I think that Doug and IndyCar, given the facts of the situation, what they could share at the time, did the right thing. But that being said, this has been a pattern. And what Doug said in the press conference was that he didn't even say he believed. He said Roger doesn't know everything. Sounds like Roger might know everything now. And Roger made this call. We know that the team owners are upset. We know that the fans are upset. We know that at least one OEM is upset about everything that has gone down in the past 2 years with the Penske organization. I think the questions really began with the 2023 Indy 500. If you watched Unverified last night, we really got into this, discussed it in great detail. And regardless of whether they called it down the middle or not, or whether they called it by the rule book, or whether they had the intention of making sure that that race had a green flag finish to appease the fans, to appease the TV partner, what have you. Ultimately, that race benefited Team Penske. It didn't benefit the other teams that were battling for the win in that race. And then you get to St. Pete of 2024 and the push to pass scandal, which, unlike the blended attenuator, I would say was a direct performance advantage for Team Penske. It was found to be on all three cars. It was used by two of them, and one of them won a race. That one was taken away. Cindric and I believe Rosinski were suspended, and they were suspended through the Indianapolis 500, much like the penalty that was handed down today. But I said this in my video on Monday evening, that in the conversations that I had in the paddock, the conversations, that I was a part of and that I wasn't a part of, but I was a part of because people told me what was said, right? The conversations I had with, for example, a team owner, where I absolutely believed that something else needed to be done to regain the trust of the paddock. And by the way, I'll talk about this a little bit later, I don't think this is exactly the end of the road yet. I don't think we've quite reached the point where the paddock is 100% going to be okay with Team Penske competing in IndyCar while Roger Penske owns Penske Entertainment. Now, I think you can get there, and I think the wheels are already in motion to get this done, but it's not done yet. And we'll talk about that here in just a second. But I want to go back to this, the fact that Tim Cindric is no longer at Team Penske. Yes, Ron Rosinski and Kyle Moyer, incredibly important aspects of this organization. And I don't want to minimize their roles or the fact that they are not going to be not only at Team Penske for the Indy 500, but for Team Penske, assumedly, for life. I wouldn't expect any of these folks to be rehired after such a dramatic and public firing. But if you don't know the story of Tim Cindric and why he is important to the Team Penske organization, you have to go back to the late 1990s. Team Penske was in a very difficult position in IndyCar racing. They had their own in-house chassis. They built their own cars. They had the Mercedes-Benz engine, which was falling down through the field in terms of competitiveness. They remained loyal to Goodyear tires long after Goodyear had lost the tire war to Firestone. The organization was in disarray. Their cars hadn't won races in, I think, 2 years. Al Unser Jr. was an aging and troubled superstar, and the second car had a revolving door of drivers that, never seemed to stick. Tim Cindric joined the organization and turned it around from the IndyCar perspective. He brought in, originally it was going to be Gilles de Ferran and Greg Moore. Unfortunately, Greg Moore was tragically killed at California Speedway in the season finale in 1999, never got to drive for Team Penske. But then Cindric brought in Helio Castroneves. He got Reynard chassis that were, yes, built in-house by Team Penske. They were not bog standard Reynard chassis, but he made a very difficult decision to move away from the Penske chassis. He got the Firestone tires for the organization. He got a Honda engine. He raised that organization up. Tim Cindric was tasked with bringing the Penske team back to Indianapolis. In fact, ran a pseudo shadow program for Jason Leffler in 2000 with Treadway Racing as kind of an introductory move into the Indianapolis 500, which ultimately led to the 1-2 finish in 2001 with Castroneves and de Ferran, and then two wins after that with Castroneves and then de Ferran. Cindric obviously was responsible for probably the greatest days of Team Penske. If you look at from 2001 to now, there haven't been a lot of lean years. No doubt about it. And that's organizationally across the board. You look at sports cars, whether it's the American Le Mans Series, whether it's Grand Am, whether it's the current form of IMSA. You look at the NASCAR program. By the way, Tim's son races for the NASCAR program. How complicated do you think that ends up getting? Industry-wide, when you've asked the question about succession plan, which has come up so often with Team Penske, especially since the purchase of the IndyCar series in 2019, the assumption has always been that Tim Cindric would be the one to take over the reins of Team Penske, that he would become the team owner someday. He's now been fired. He put in all of this work, built this organization, essentially rebuilt it into the powerhouse that it is today, and he's been fired. You think that that's not a massive, massive, massive decision for Roger Penske to make? I mean, I don't think you can underestimate or understate the gravity of the decision that has been made here. Now, is it a decision that should have been made after St. Pete in 2024? More likely than not. The buck has to stop with somebody. And, like I've said in the past, there has been some red flags of major organizational problems on the competition side at Team Penske. Clearly, Roger saw the same thing that the paddock has seen for a long time, and the decision has been made. And it's crazy. I mean, it's not even cutting your nose off at this point. It's almost like cutting off an arm or two. I think this is a good start. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, and I think this is probably where things should. This is how severe St. Pete should have been treated last year. It wasn't, but now it has been. There's more that needs to be done, though, and I suppose we'll talk about that now, which is the question of officiating Team Penske and how to do it in a completely independent fashion. Do you go as far as to create or find a sanctioning body to run the competition and operations side of this organization? I don't know where you would find that. There's not a lot of organizations that could do it. I don't think you could just go to IMSA or NASCAR or USAC and say, we would like you to sanction our series for us. Could you create an independent council of people from outside of the organization that could rule in decisions like this? Maybe. Where do those people come from? Because, when you start throwing names out there, what are the names that come to mind? You think of a guy like Michael Andretti. You don't think he's connected to some of the major players that he would have to make decisions against? Of course not. You think of a guy, I could throw a name out there like John Menard. You could throw a name out there like Tony George. I'm just throwing names out there, right? Who could serve on a council like this, be unbiased, but still have the racing knowledge to be able to make the correct decisions in an unbiased fashion, in a fair fashion that takes care of the teams, and quite honestly, should take care of Team Penske too. This is going to sound wild to say, but especially if there is an independent organization that oversees part or all of this series, you are going to have to start treating Team Penske fairly and not just over punishing them because you happen to be writing the paychecks to the people who are making the decisions on them, right? So treat the OEMs fairly. Treat everyone fairly. I think ultimately that's where we want to get the sport. All of the ugliness of the past 2 years, and I would probably argue 3, and I think other people would argue all the way back to 2019, all of this ugliness, all of this mistrust has created a tremendous gap, a tremendous problem in the sport. The good, and again, full credit to Roger Penske for doing this. Full credit. Because it is, as I explained, it is not easy to fire Tim Cindric. It is not easy to fire the general manager of the IndyCar or the IndyCar managing director from your organization. The three heads, the three leaders of your three teams that are going to race for your 21st Indy 500 win in less than a week. That has to be commended. I don't care how you feel about Roger, whether you feel that he hasn't gone far enough, if he didn't go far enough quickly enough. I think we have to live in the present in this time, and he has done something that is what I would say I think a lot of people in the industry wanted him to do from the start. Is it bad to reach the destination a little bit late if ultimately you came to the destination? I don't know if you can hold that against them. I think the next few weeks in IndyCar are going to be some of the most important that you've ever seen, because I think IndyCar in a lot of ways is going to have to reestablish their credibility as an organization that is going to treat everyone fairly. I think the rule book's going to need to be taken a look at, and I think you're going to need to put in some sort of an independent check to this series, whether that's as far as a full-on different sanctioning body coming in and handling the comp and ops, or if that is an independent counsel, what have you. But I think these things are all on the table, and I think if done right, I think you have a potential of not only saving all of these relationships, which have been so tedious over the past couple of years and precarious and teetering on the edge, and you know who's going to leave and who's not, and who's going to sell and who's not. I think you have the potential to earn that trust back. And I should say this too. I think full credit to the Doug Bowles run IndyCar. I think that the seriousness of how this relatively minor offense in the grand scheme of things has been treated, especially given the prior history that took place not under the Doug Bowles presidency of IndyCar, I think needs to be commended. I think that there's a lot of damage that needs to be fixed, a lot of damage that needs to be undone. But right now, what I'm seeing, and trust me when I say this, I do not have a reason to say nice things, right? I really don't. I try to be as unbiased as I possibly can in these situations. I'll rip them when they deserve it, but I feel like you need to praise them when they are, even if they are doing the right things slower than I think, or more slowly than I think most everyone, including myself, would have wanted them to see them do it. You have to commend them when they are doing it, and they have done it now. This might be a pivot point where we see real, meaningful change in IndyCar racing. And I think that could be a great thing in the future. But this is a freaking massive story. I mean, this is freaking massive, and it's not done. I do not believe for a second that we are done with this story and the long-term ramifications of it. The 2025 Indianapolis 500 is quickly becoming one of the most historical points in our sport's recent history. We're happy you guys are along with us for the ride. Thank you guys so much for watching. Much more content to come. By the way, the greatest spectacle in racing is this week. I can't wait for it. We'll see you then.